The rules of American retirement just underwent a massive overhaul, and the government is finally letting your 401k act like a billionaire's hedge fund.
Yeah, it's a completely fundamental rewiring of the entire system.
Welcome to the deep dive. We've got a really formidable stack of recent government policy documents on the table today, and we are going to break it all down for you.
Right, we're looking at major executive orders from 2018, 2025, and 2026, plus some newly overhauled IRS tables and, sweeping Department of Labor rules.
Exactly. And our mission today is to figure out how the government is bringing 38 million Americans into the retirement system, allowing wild card alternative assets into everyday 401ks, and officially changing the math on how long you are expected to live.
And before we jump into the mechanics of all this, we really should do a quick tone check.
Yeah, that's important.
Because a lot of the documents we're analyzing today involve direct policy reversals. We're looking at actions from the current Trump administration that roll back or heavily modify guidelines set during the Biden administration.
Right. And to be super clear, our role here isn't to take a political stance or endorse any specific economic viewpoint. We are just the messengers.
Exactly. We're just conveying the facts straight from the sources, explaining the financial logic, and outlining what it actually means for your portfolio.
We just follow the math. So let's start with the access barrier. Because before we can talk about putting wild new assets into an account, we have to address the elephant in the room.
Yeah, the millions of people who don't even have one.
Right. And the scale of this gap is honestly staggering.
It really is. According to the sources, 38 million private sector employees lack access to a workplace retirement plan.
38 million, that's what, almost a quarter of the workforce?
Yep, it's 23% of all full-time workers. And if you look at part-time workers, the lockout rate jumps to 34%.
Over a third. And when you dig into it, it's entirely driven by the size of the company you work for.
Totally. If you land a job at a massive corporation, 500 or more employees, you're pretty much set. About 89% of those workers get a retirement plan.
But if you work for a small business with fewer than 100 workers, your odds drop to basically a coin flip, just 53%.
Right. And it forces us to ask why that discrepancy exists. It's not like small business owners don't care about their employees.
No, of course not. It's just that setting up a traditional 401k is incredibly burdensome.
Exactly. It's expensive, the paperwork is a nightmare, and most importantly, it exposes the owner to massive legal liability.
Under ERISA.
Yeah, ERISA, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. If I'm a small bakery owner, why does ERISA matter to me?
Well, if you set up a 401k, you legally become a fiduciary. You have to act strictly in the best financial interest of the participants.
So if I pick a mutual fund with fees that are just a little too high...
Your own employees can sue you for a breach of fiduciary duty.
Wow, okay, so you're trying to bake bread, and suddenly you need to be a wealth manager with a legal target on your back.
Exactly, which is why they just opt out. But that brings us to the first big structural change. Multiple employer plans, or MEPs.
Right, from the 2018 executive order and the subsequent labor rules. I like to think of MEPs as like corporate carpooling for retirement.
Oh, corporate carpooling. I like that analogy.
Yeah, because instead of everyone buying their own expensive car, paying for their own gas and insurance...
Which is incredibly inefficient.
Right. Unrelated small businesses can band together and basically charter a massive bus. They pool their purchasing power, which lowers the cost for everyone.
But the real magic isn't just the shared cost. It's who's driving the bus.
Right. The new rules establish a framework for professional employer organizations, or PEOs.
The PEOs are the professional chauffeurs in this scenario.
But wait, if I'm the bakery owner, why would I link arms with random businesses? Doesn't that just expose me to even more liability if someone else messes up?
That's the brilliant part. The PEO contractually steps in as the named fiduciary.
Oh, wow. So they take the legal hit.
Exactly. They take on the major legal risks. They handle the complex reporting. They select the funds. The small business owner just flips a switch to route payroll into the plan.
So they get corporate benefits without the legal minefield. That is huge. But MEPs only solve the problem for people who actually have an employer.
Right, which leaves out the entire gig economy.
Yeah, the Uber drivers, the freelance designers. And that naturally leads to the 2026 executive order establishing TrumpIRA.gov, which launches in January 2027.
This is a major pivot. It's a direct-to-consumer marketplace for independent workers.
It really is. The platform connects gig workers with private sector IRAs, but with a massive catch. Fees are capped at 0.15%.
And we really need to emphasize why that fee cap is so vital. High fees are like a silent parasite on compounding interest.
It just eats your returns alive over 30 years.
Exactly. Capping it at 0.15% ensures almost all the yield stays in the worker's pocket.
But the real hook here isn't the fee cap. It's the federal savers match.
Oh, yeah. The matching program is staggering.
Right. If you're an eligible lower or middle income worker, the government will match your contribution dollar for dollar up to $1,000 a year.
And the math on that is wild. The sources give this example of a 25-year-old saving just $165 a month.
Which is like, what, $5 a day?
Yeah, roughly. If they get that full $1,000 match every year, assuming a 6% return, they could end up with $465,000 by age 65.
Almost $500,000, basically just from getting the government match. The behavioral economics here are incredibly clever.
It's simulating the corporate 401k match for people who don't have a corporation.
Because nobody wants to leave free money on the table. But here's where it gets really interesting, and honestly a bit confusing. Is the government actually managing our money now?
No, that's a common misconception. The government is strictly a matchmaker here.
Okay, good, because having Washington pick stocks for gig workers sounds like a disaster.
Right, it would be. But the executive order is explicit. The government runs the digital storefront, but the actual IRAs are managed by private sector financial institutions.
So Wall Street still drives the cars. Got it. So now we've covered how millions of people are getting into the market, but the sources show a radical shift in what you can actually buy once you get there.
Yeah, we are moving into the 2025 executive order on democratizing access to alternative assets.
This feels like opening the VIP room of Wall Street to everyday workers. Because for decades, a regular 401k was just stocks and bonds, vanilla or chocolate.
Right. But if you were a billionaire or a massive pension fund, you were investing in alternative assets.
Yeah.
Private equity, commercial real estate, private credit.
And crypto, right.
Exactly. Digital assets. Historically, everyday workers were locked out of these.
But this new order shifts the Department of Labor to a, quote, neutral, principle-based approach.
It officially rolls back previous Biden administration restrictions on digital assets and rescinds warnings against private equity. The DOL is no longer picking winners and losers based on the asset class.
Okay, so the door is open, but mechanically, how does an average guy with 50 grand in his account buy a slice of a skyscraper or a private equity buyout?
Through target date funds or TDS.
Oh, the classic set it and forget it funds.
Exactly. The professional manager of the TDF pools the capital of thousands of workers. They allocate a small percentage of that massive pool into alternative assets.
So it's embedded directly into the broader portfolio.
Right. And a Georgetown study we looked at showed that embedding these alternatives could raise annual retirement income by an estimated 17%.
17% is a massive boost. But wait, I have to push back here. What does this actually mean for the risk? We are taking everyday workers and letting them put life savings into highly volatile crypto and highly illiquid private equity.
It's a very valid concern.
Aren't we just setting up employers for massive lawsuits when the market tanks?
The threat of opportunistic lawsuits is actually the biggest roadblock. The deal's neutral stance doesn't erase your fiduciary duty. You still have to act prudently.
So how do you avoid getting sued if the crypto market crashes?
The deal is developing what they call fiduciary safe harbors.
Which is like a compliance checklist.
Exactly. It's a legally binding roadmap from the government. If you hire an independent appraiser, cap the exposure at a certain percentage, and follow the steps, you're protected.
Oh, so if you follow the checklist perfectly, the trial lawyer can't win just because the asset lost money.
Right. It creates a legally protected channel to offer higher return options without the constant fear of litigation.
Okay, so we've covered getting into a plan and the wild new assets you can hold. But the end game is taking the money out.
Yeah, the distribution phase.
And the final sources show how the government is literally changing the math on human life to let you keep your money longer.
This is all about the Secure Act and the updated IRS life expectancy tables from 2022.
Let's talk about required minimum distributions, or RMDs. Because the IRS gives you a tax break up front, but eventually they force you to take the money out so they can tax it.
Right. Under the old rules, that started at age 70 and a half.
I've always thought of it like a tax treadmill. The IRS puts you on it, and as you get older, it speeds up, forcing you to withdraw larger percentages.
Which becomes taxable income.
Yeah.
But the Secure Act pushed that starting age back to 72.
So they slowed down the treadmill.
Yes. But the real shift is the updated life expectancy tables. The government completely overhauled the actuarial math.
Let's walk through that math because it's pretty fascinating.
The IRS calculates your forced withdrawal by dividing your account balance by your official life expectancy factor. The new tables recognize that people are living longer.
So the denominator gets bigger.
Exactly. Under the old tables, a 72-year-old had a life expectancy of 25.6 years. Now it's 27.4 years.
And for surviving spouses, it jumped too, right?
Yep, a 75-year-old surviving spouse went from 13.4 years to 14.8 years.
Okay, so if I have $1 million and I have to divide it by a larger number, my required withdrawal shrinks. Why should the listener actually care about an extra 1.8 years on a spreadsheet?
Because lower forced withdrawals mean you keep a larger chunk of your savings inside that tax-favored account.
Ah, so it avoids the tax hit.
It avoids the tax hit and the money stays invested, compounding and growing for your later years.
That is incredible. Just a few decimal points on an actuary's spreadsheet keeps tens of thousands of dollars compounding for an average retiree.
It completely changes the timeline of wealth distribution.
It really does. So to summarize this whole journey we've been on today, we started with 38 million Americans locked out of the system and saw how MEPs are fixing that for small businesses.
And how TrumpIRA.gov is using a federal match to bring gig workers in.
Right. Then we looked at how everyday 401ks are suddenly getting access to billionaire-level alternative assets like crypto and private equity.
And finally, how the IRS is officially slowing down the tax treadmill so your money lasts longer.
It's a completely new playbook, which leaves us with one final kind of provocative thought to chew on based on these sources.
Okay.
As everyday retirement accounts begin to look exactly like the complex portfolios of billionaires, packed with private equity, real estate, and digital assets, will the biggest risk to our retirement no longer be outliving our money, but rather failing to understand what we actually own?
That is the big question, because when you open up the VIP room, the burden of education really shifts to the individual.
Exactly. The doors are open. We just have to know how to navigate the room.